releases, people will call them like purple tops. They come with like this sort of purple foil on the top of them that are like infamous within the whiskey community as being these like ultra desirable things.
That's so cool. Okay, I'm going to try taking a taste. I've been trying to learn how to describe whiskeys lately, so fingers crossed that I can do a halfway decent job.
Yeah. You tell me what your impressions are, and then I can give you some technical information about it if you're curious, because that way I won't kind of like color your impression.
I love that. That's perfect. Mm.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Would you care to try some whiskey with us?
Yeah, good. Show what you got.
So it's very spicy, right?
It is, yeah.
It's more spice forward than fruit forward. There's still some fruit in there, but I'm almost getting like darker fruits. Like as opposed to an apple or a pear, I'm getting like almost like dark cherry or pomegranate.
Absolutely, and those are pretty classic bourbon tasting notes. Generally speaking, bourbon as a whiskey is not going to be an especially fruity one. Bourbon is predominantly a corn-based spirit.
Yes.
And corn, even good like old school heirloom corn is just not that chemically complex of a grain. So it's not like, say, single malt whiskey, right? Malted barley,
yes,
used there, right, has a lot of chemical complexity to it. So the yeast kind of spins off and creates all these very complex molecules. Bourbon's a little more straightforward. So you tend to get those darker fruits. You'll get tannin as well from the barrel.
Tannin,
yes.
Also
kind of maybe some of that spice you're touching on. And of course, there's the actual like alcohol itself, which kind of contributes to that sensation of spice. And then beyond, those sort of like basic bourbon things, this is what I would call a very heavily wheated whiskey.
A wheated whiskey, yes.
Yeah. So typically in bourbon, your main grains are, a lot of corn, a little bit of malted barley, and then the difference between those two is normally rye.
So yes.
Whiskey, yeah, of course. So with a wheated whiskey, you're swapping out that rye for a wheat component.
A wheat.
And it gives you, I'll give you a glass, it's worth it.
That's so cool, thank you.
Yeah. So wheat gives you essentially the exact opposite flavor profile as rye. Instead of that kind of masculine spiciness, you get a slightly more like soft, floral, kind of sweet
yes.
And it's worth noting here as well that this is a very heavily wheated whiskey. Normally, a wheated whiskey, you can assume it's maybe like 8, 9, 10% wheat. Like a heavily wheated whiskey is more like 13, 14. This guy is 20. So this is a
20.
Very heavily wheated whiskey.
Which you would say would add more of the fruity floral.
More of the floral and definitely also more of that particular kind of complex wheat sweetness.
Yes.
Which is a different sweetness than you get from the corn.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's very useful in a cocktail like this because here in a paper plane you have 2 different separate bitter components. So it's really worthwhile to have a sweeter whiskey to kind of balance against them.
I love that. So we've got the whiskey, we've got all 3 of the different kinds of whiskey here, right? We've got the Willet, we've got the Marseille, the red, and lemon juice.
Yeah, so these are the bitter components.
So those are bitters.
Yeah,
oh my
so
gosh, I'm a dummy.
Yeah, so these are
I didn't even look at them.
Yeah, these are like Italian-style spirits. These are made by a producer in Brooklyn.
Yes.
And these are a relatively flavorless spirit that's been soaked with a variety of different botanicals, herbs, right, and various bittering agents. So this red guy here is kind of like Campari.
Yes.
I would say much better than Campari. In fact, it's modeled after Campari from the 60s.
That's
and
so cool.
The closest thing to that you'll ever find without buying a vintage bottle. And then this guy here is based off of an old French recipe from the city of Marseille. It's a very interesting, slightly softer style of bitter liqueur than the more Italian style ones you sometimes see. The Italian ones tend to be either very, very dry and very, very bitter.
Yeah.
Very, very, very sweet. There's kind of no in between. This kind of French style is a little bit more in that kind of in between zone, a little softer.
That's so cool. Thank you. Thank you. I apologize if I'm wildly wrong on many occasions. I actually really like to be corrected because so often it's like, I'm an actor, so in a lot of times in my life I feel like I have to just be like, yes, I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And so it's so nice to come somewhere and be like, I have no idea what I'm talking about. Let's learn.
Yeah, that's life, right?
Cheers, friends, to... Here's to education.
It's education.
By any means necessary.
That's great.
Ooh, yes. Okay. We got that lemon, but then it's, I can really, I love bitters because it's like, they always make things so much more complex. Okay. That's so interesting. Yeah.